So here is this is the event graph for the first blueprint that I have here. I'm going to go through two blueprints. So since we're doing amusement park rides, I wanted to do some form of roller coaster in whatever form it might be, but um, to do that you need to have a spline that it can follow. So I wanted to learn how to make something follow a spline, and I've been able to do it in other programs, but learning how to do it in Unreal with blueprints was actually it's a little bit different than what I thought it would be. So let's take a look at this one right here. The only thing that we have is a spline in this one. Actually, the event graph is just empty. There's nothing to this part, actually. We just needed to make a spline that we could reference later for the second blueprint. And the second blueprint is where we do all the rotations and the transformations for the cart and everything. So let's go take a look at that one. Alright, so let me zoom out here. And the only thing that we do during the event begin play is just use our own event that we've created, and it starts right here. So we want it to go along a track. So I'm gonna skip over this part right here until the end, actually, because I'll come back to that. So here we have a timeline that we're using to go and bring us an alpha that we can use to get the distance along the spline that we created, right? So using a lerp, you can tell it with an alpha how to blend between two values. So this is your A and this is your B. We know the B is the end of the spline, or the total length of it, and A is 0. So if we have an alpha that goes from 0 to 1, we can tell it how it needs to blend between them, which will tell us how long it takes to get from the beginning of the spline that we create to the end of the spline. So the way that we actually got that spline in is we just made a variable, a custom one, because you can add it here, and then we just changed it to a variable type, and then we chose our other blueprint and we told it to reference that object. And from there we could tell it we want to get the target that we called spline. So we made a spline in the other blueprint, we named it spline, and that's the one that we're looking at. And that's a target that we want to use for this function right here, the get location at distance along spline. And then the same thing with get the rotation at the distance along the same spline. So we get the location and the rotation along the spline at any distance that's found from using this lerp. So we get the spline length, and that's based off of the same spline that we got. So we just plugged it in, got the length of it, plugged it into this B here, and then the alpha that we have from this timeline tells it how it's going to blend. So over the period of 1 second, it's going to go from the beginning to the end of the spline. So that's how that works. And then, simple enough, we just use the set actor location and rotation. And then all we do is we just plug in the location here to here, this the new location, and from this get rotation to this new rotation. And that's all you have to do. It'll just tell it where it is along the spline and how it's rotated on it. And then I wanted to give some extra control over how you can rotate it further. So even though it might get rotated along the spline, we want to add some local control on how we can do it, because a lot of times you'll spin around things even as you're moving along it. So I wanted to add that control in, and I just used an add local rotation. And then I just promoted this variable and then allowed it to be public, so that when you're using the tool you can switch it outside of the blueprint event graph. And then the last thing here is just we wanted to give some control over how we could, how fast it would play through this. So if we know that our timeline is going over 1 second, so if we take 1 second here and divide it by a duration that we have, you'll get smaller increments. So as you increase duration, you'll start making this go slower. So if you change duration to 5, you'll have a fifth of it, so it'll be 5 times longer. It'll play back 5 times slower. So you can control that. You can control how fast it goes from the beginning to the end by seconds now. And then the only other part is if you want it to start later, then you can do that. You can control that through this promoted variable too. So you can tell it how long do you want it to last and when do you want it to start, and that's just plugged into this timeline. And that's basically all of it. So to summarize, we get the location and the rotation from the spline. We tell it that's where we need to set the location and rotation for the cart, and then we just give some customized control over how fast it's going to play back. And then the last part right here is just telling it, call this event that we want. And it just tells it, run along the track and repeat yourself whenever you're finished. So that's pretty much all there is to this one. Let's go to let's compile this and save it, and then let's go and look at it running through the actual thing. So I'm going to stop this right second, actually go and show you. So we drew out the spline here. It starts, and we just gave, it some curviness, and we just drew out the spline, and then let's go see how it actually runs through this. So I'm going to click play here, and I'm going to go F11, and let's take a look at it. So we gave some individual control, and we can see how it's following the curve that we drew out. So if we wanted to, have a roller coaster, this could be a good way to start that. Even though, this isn't very realistic, but it's still fun to see it kind of just slinging the person around. So that box is the cart, and then that little sphere where it's connected by that little pole, that's where you'd be. So you're just going to be being rotated along this curve, and you're going to rotate around it. You're just going to be slung around, and it'll be wacky. So that's pretty much all there is to this. Thank you.